5 years had passed. The eruption of Toba swallowed the world in its wrath. The falling ash buried not only the land, but also hope. Babies no longer cried, because none survived. Tribes vanished one by one, while the fires of the great fortress still burned like an eternal hell. That day, the last child died. Umai broke tradition. She refused to return the child to nature, and instead shielded it with stones. She made a promise to return and see that child again. Umai was no longer just a mother. She had become the last hope of the tribes.
5 winters have passed. Spring never came. Our allies shut their doors and thousands of us perished. But now it is time to build a new home. Boramiti from the great fortress showed me the way. We will cross the great sea, follow the rising sun, and traverse the mountains. Beyond the 2 rivers lies life.
Umai walked ahead. No one else knew the way, but they all followed her. She had become the symbol of their last, fragile hope. They walked for days and slept hungry for nights. But at last, the Valley of the Sun revealed itself. Between the 2 rivers, life awaited them, ready to bloom again. Umai never forgot the promise she made to the child. Here, in this land, life would bloom once again. Children would laugh, and the stars would guide them once more.
This is our new home. Our fire will burn bright here. The sun will greet us, and the stars. The stars will speak to us again. Our children will smile once more.
Umai Valley was a bridge between the stars and humanity. Every 7 winters, tribes gathered here to celebrate the name of Umai. The festival fire was a symbol of unity and hope. This gathering was more than a celebration. It was a time for trade, friendship, and renewing bonds. The valley's rivers and stars guided their lives. But this year, whispers began to spread through Umai Valley. It was said that the tribes west of the Purna River were meeting with forbidden outsiders, blonde strangers who defied the sacred laws of Umai. The chieftain of the tribes hunting near the sources of the Purna and Adna rivers shouted before the assembly, "This brotherhood ends here. We cannot share this land with those who betray Umai's laws." The mountain tribes, loyal to Umai's laws, declared their decision to retreat north. To them, the blonde outsiders were harbingers of death. The brotherhood was broken. The sea tribes also chose to leave, heading east to find a new homeland. For them, Umai Valley would soon be a memory. Umai would now be remembered only in the heavens. The Venus star carried her light, but this division marked a new chapter for Mesopotamia. To the children of Umai, the blonde strangers were a threat. They were seen as bringers of chaos and death to this sacred land. The mountain tribes walked north, seeking a new beginning under Umai's shadow. Each step was guided by the stars above. The smoke rising from the valley was not just the remains of a celebration, but the echo of a shattered brotherhood. Yet the children of Umai, guided by the stars, would continue to write their own destiny. The mountain tribes, vast in number, gathered one last time before parting ways. 2 paths stretched before them, one to the northern peaks, the other to the western riverbanks. This would be their final meeting for 20 solar cycles. To preserve their unity and honor Umai, the tribes divided their fates. One would brave the cold northern mountains, while the other would seek the bountiful lands along Adna's western banks. Both paths promised peril and hope. Preparations began in earnest. The tribes wove their defenses against the unknown. Furs for the cold, spears for predators, and prayers for the unknown. With blessings whispered to the winds and smoke rising to the heavens, the tribes began their journeys. Their hearts heavy, their spirits resolute, they carried the name of Umai into the wilderness. The northern path tested their endurance. Snow-laden peaks and howling winds sought to break their spirits. But the tribe pressed on, guided by the stars and their faith in Umai. The western path held its own perils. Predators and disease tested their resolve. Yet the flowing waters of Adna promised life and sustenance. They built shelters to endure the nights, one in the frozen embrace of the mountains, the other in the shadow of the river's winding path. Each tribe carried the spirit of Umai in their hands and hearts. Though separated by great distances, the tribes remained united under the watchful eye of Umai. Venus, their eternal star, bound them as one. After 20 cycles of the sun, they returned. Weathered and changed, they brought with them the next generation. The valley's fire roared once more, a beacon of their enduring bond. They gathered not just to share their stories, but to renew their bond. In the name of Umai, their children carried forward the promise to meet again. Under the eternal light of Venus, they would never forget. The sea tribes, frail compared to their mountain kin, feared the long journey ahead. Their boats were humble, meant only for daily fishing, not for crossing the unknown. Yet the path of Umai called to them, and they chose to leave, knowing they would never return. They prepared for the impossible, gathering what little they had. Tools, furs, and planks of wood would serve them in the days to come, as they set their sights on the distant east. Under the watchful gaze of the moon, they sought Umai's blessing one last time. The sea, their cradle and their challenge, would be both ally and adversary. With heavy hearts, they left their home. Each step away from the sea felt like abandoning their essence, but they carried their faith in Umai and the hope of a new beginning. The land was not kind to those born of the sea. The forests whispered of dangers, and the rivers tugged at their resolve. Yet they pressed on, guided by the memory of Umai. They reached the edge of the forest, only to be met by the great unknown. The plains stretched endlessly, their goal hidden beyond the horizon. Doubt crept into their hearts as the nights grew colder. Yet they found strength in the stories of Umai and in the warmth of their shared struggle. They reached a haven where the trees offered their strength and the waters promised life. Here they built the vessels that would carry their legacy. They said goodbye, not only to their old lives, but to the fears that bound them. With lanterns floating away like memories, they turned to face the east. They left behind the sea, but not the spirit of Umai. Under her guiding star, they sailed toward the unknown, carrying hope, faith, and the promise of a new beginning. 74,000 years ago, in what is now northern Spain, a small tribe of Neanderthals roamed the frozen lands, surviving on the edge of extinction. For 5 long winters, the sun offered little warmth, and the earth grew barren. In the south, the fair-haired people with whom they traded for shells and salt had vanished. The tribe waited, but no one came. Hunger grew fierce, and desperation became their guide. Driven by hunger, they turned north, raiding abandoned shelters, chasing whispers of survival. One frigid evening, they stumbled upon a cave, its mouth dark and yawning like a silent invitation. Sidron Cave. Inside, a small family huddled in fear. 3 figures who had nothing to offer but their meager existence. The leader of the tribe had faced this choice before. His people demanded meat. But here, there was only weakness. Desperation silenced compassion. The family's cries echoed against the stone walls, lost to the howling wind outside. The tribe stayed in the cave, sheltered by its walls, but haunted by its silence. The fire burned low, its embers reflecting the darkness in their hearts. When the wind changed, they moved on. But Sidron stayed with them, a shadow in their souls. Even now, the wind whispers through Sidron Cave, carrying the story of a time when survival came at the cost of humanity. In the shadow of Croatia's ancient mountains, a tribe stirred with purpose. The 7-year cycle had come full circle, and the Chijichi festival called them southward. The people worked tirelessly, crafting treasures from the spoils of their hunt. The tribe had harvested the gifts of the land: skins of bison, bones of rhinos, tusks of boars, and delicate ornaments carved from the teeth of marmots. These treasures would be their currency. With their goods prepared, they set forth. The journey to Chijichi was swift but arduous, the trails winding through dense forests and over jagged hills. As the sun set over Chijichi, the sacred lake revealed itself, its golden sands stretching wide to welcome the tribes. Tents dotted the shore, and the air buzzed with life. This was a place of harmony. No blade was drawn, no theft dared, for this was sacred ground where peace reigned and joy flourished. The festival was alive. Young warriors and maidens danced around towering fires, their shadows leaping against the starry sky. Drums and flutes wove an ancient melody. By day, the trade grounds became the heart of the festival. Bone flutes, intricate necklaces, and carved talismans passed from hand to hand, each piece telling a story. The blue stones were the most coveted of all. Believed to bring beauty and luck, they carried the weight of dreams and aspirations. As night fell again, the tribes gathered for a feast. Bison roasts turned over fires, and the rich aroma of stew filled the air. This was a time for stories and shared laughter. When the festival ended, the tribes carried its spirit back to their lands. Chijichi was more than a place. It was a bond, a memory, and a promise of return. From the misty forests of the Balkans, a group of tall, broad-shouldered hunters emerged, their figures commanding and foreign. They spoke in a tongue unfamiliar to the short, stocky people of the valley. The strangers raised their hands in a gesture of peace. The valley people, hesitant but intrigued, responded with their own rudimentary greeting. With hesitant trust, the valley people led the strangers to their village. There, the newcomers' tools and garments captured every gaze. Among the newcomers was a young hunter with striking blue eyes. His presence drew the attention of the valley's young women, who whispered and giggled from the shadows. As the fire burned bright, the valley people prepared a simple feast. The strangers joined the celebration, their laughter blending with the crackling flames. The warmth of the evening gave way to the cold dread of dawn. The strangers awoke to find one of their own missing. Words failed, but anger bridged the gap. The strangers demanded answers, their gestures sharp and accusatory. The valley people recoiled, their fear growing. With no resolution, the strangers were driven away. The valley people, armed with crude spears, forced them back into the forest. Before disappearing into the trees, the strangers shouted promises of their return. They vowed to reclaim what was lost, whether through peace or vengeance. As winter's chill began to fade, the valley people looked to the horizon, their hearts heavy with the fear of what spring might bring. 60,000 years ago, a group of primitive seafarers left the cradle of Mesopotamia. Their destination was unknown, their journey perilous. Yet they were driven by a deep longing to explore and survive. The seafarers navigated treacherous waters, guided only by the stars. Each wave was a challenge, every gust of wind a gamble. Their journey led them to towering mountain ranges, an intimidating barrier between them and the fertile lands they sought. Exhausted but determined, they finally arrived at verdant plains. Yet the unfamiliarity of the land weighed on them. In these lands, the stars they had trusted were hidden by clouds. Without their celestial guides, they felt lost. Here, they met uninvited guests, thieves who moved like shadows, stealing what little the seafarers had. When they captured some of these thieves, they were struck by their resemblance to themselves. But there were differences: narrow eyes, dark hair, frail bodies. Some among the seafarers wished to stay in these fertile lands. Others, driven by curiosity and restlessness, yearned to push further east. Finally, they parted ways. Those who stayed hoped to build a new life, while the rest ventured into the unknown, chasing the promise of discovery. The journey was far from over. As the travelers ventured east, they carried with them the spirit of their ancestors, a spirit that sought, endured, and dreamed. The seafarers from Mesopotamia continued their voyage, their small boats slicing through uncharted waters. They carried with them the ancient wisdom of their ancestors and a deep longing for a new home. The islands of the South China Sea became their sanctuary. With fertile lands and abundant resources, they began to spread and flourish. They explored the surrounding islands with small boats, their navigational skills honed by generations of stargazing. Occasionally, they encountered small native tribes, but as time passed, these tribes seemed to vanish, leaving the seafarers alone in their growing domain. As they adapted to their new life, they began to forget the oaths and origins that had once defined them. The stars, once sacred symbols, became mere tools for navigation. In time, they began to trade with the blonde-haired tribes, once enemies of their ancestors. This trade brought prosperity, but also dissent. One among them refused to accept this new life. Speaking the ancient tongue, he reminded them of their forgotten oaths and warned of the dangers of forgetting their roots. The seafarers, now content with their new life, saw him as a threat. They cast him out, banishing him to the farthest southern seas. Without the voice of dissent, the seafarers fully embraced their new identity. They thrived, yet the echoes of their past lingered in the stars. Far to the south, the exile ventured into unknown waters, carrying the memories of a forgotten oath. His journey was a solitary one, but it was far from over. Abogu, cast out by his people, carried with him a face that told of his lineage: dark skin, black hair, a broad nose, prominent cheekbones, and a wide mouth. With his family, he ventured into the unknown, paddling their small canoes toward the farthest island they could imagine. They arrived at a land unlike any they had known. Strange creatures bounded across the open plains, while others lurked in the shadows of dense forests. This was Australia, a place of both wonder and challenge. Though deeply tied to his ancestors and their stories, Abogu chose to leave the past behind. In this new world, he focused on survival and building a life for his children. 3 generations later, the stories of Abogu's people were forgotten. His descendants only knew the land they lived on and the life they had built. One day, the skies were filled with the hum of strange flying vessels. Blonde-haired people descended, unlike anything Abogu's descendants had ever seen. The blonde visitors stayed for a time, sharing knowledge and resources. To Abogu's descendants, these visitors were nothing short of gods. As suddenly as they had arrived, the visitors departed. Their flying crafts disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind a mixture of wonder and loss. With their departure, the blondes became the stuff of legend. Stories of their divine presence were passed down, growing more mystical with each retelling. Generations later, the memory of the blondes was no longer history, but a dream. Their story became a bridge between reality and imagination. And so, the descendants of Abogu carried on, their lives shaped by the land, their stories shaped by the skies, and their dreams forever marked by the fleeting presence of the gods they once knew. Leaving fertile lands is difficult. However, for the people of the mountains, survival meant searching for new homelands. As Mesopotamia was left behind, the uncertainty of the future lay ahead. Every step was a new trial. The mountain passes were rocky, and the weather was merciless. Women carried their children while men remained vigilant against dangers. This path was one where only the strong would survive. The true owners of the mountains, the hungry wolves, emerged in the darkness. These attacks became moments where both courage and wisdom were tested. Life and death were as close as a single breath. The travelers faced their first enemies. These red-haired, high-browed tribes tracked like shadows, attacking whenever they found an opportunity. The attacks had left great losses behind. Supplies dwindled, and hope was shattered. Yet there was no turning back. The journey had to continue. The hardships of the mountains were left behind. Vast grasslands and a great river promised hope for a new beginning. However, this was only a harbinger of new challenges. When night fell, fire was not just a source of warmth. It was a beacon of hope. Ideas were shared, and plans were made to establish a new homeland. Life on the steppe both challenged and reshaped people. Shelters were built with the limited resources at hand. Survival in these lands required solidarity. The Red Tribes came again, this time in greater numbers and with more courage. But the mountain people were prepared. The first battle would set the new rules of life. Winter revealed its harsh face on the steppe. Every breath became a struggle. Hunger and disease were the harshest teachers of this new life. They had to learn in order to survive, Even their enemies became a source of knowledge. This land was theirs now. They had to learn how to endure here. New enemies, new threats. Survival meant facing even greater trials. Uniting, fighting, and protecting were now necessities. 7 years passed. For the sacredness of Umayana, it was time to return to Mesopotamia. This journey was the key to connecting with the past and shaping the future. The journey was not just a return. It was also an exploration of the unknown. Mysterious caves whispered the voices of the past. Returning to Mesopotamia was not a victory. This was no longer their homeland. Their new life would take shape on different lands with different struggles. The first lights of dawn echoed in the endless waves of the steppe. 50,000 years ago, these lands were the kingdom of hunters and the wind. The dark-haired tribe was preparing for a new hunt with the first light of day. However, the steppe was not always peaceful. To survive here, one had to be strong. On the edge of the steppe, another tribe wandered among the shadows. The red-bearded ones. They were also after prey, but this time their targets might not be just animals. The dark-haired tribe watched from afar. What they didn't know was that a much bigger secret awaited them in the depths of the forest. Inside the forest, there was an unknown life. As the red-bearded ones moved silently, they sensed a movement in the shadows. But the forest people were as fast as the wind. They disappeared in an instant. The spirit of the forest did not accept strangers. They were not used to living in captivity. The steppe people set the forest people free. But the forest people were as mysterious as their liberation. They quickly disappeared. Every tribe had a spirit, and that spirit was shaped in their totems. The gray wolf was the symbol of hunting and power, the sun of wisdom, the deer of elegance, the river of abundance, the forest of mystery. These totems would determine the fate of the tribes. The night of the steppe was for lone wolves and hunters. The hunters of the gray wolf tribe advanced, listening to the whispers of the wind. Silence was their weapon. Their eyes picked out their prey from among the shadows. Taut boughs, the whisper of arrows, and the inevitable silence of death. To survive in the steppe, it was not enough to be just a hunter. The Redbeards had discovered salt. For them, salt was as precious as blood. They made sharp knives from bones and bartered them for salt. But nothing was free in the steppe. Other tribes also wanted this white treasure. When the sun rose, the shaman of the Sun tribe looked to the sky. The prophecy was clear. Before the sun sets, the land will be washed with blood. But those who follow the light will find a new path. The silence of the steppe was the harbinger of the coming storm. Time flowed differently in the forest. The trees had stood for thousands of years, and the sound of the wind told the spirits of those who lived there. The forest tribe was like the shadows in nature. Before they saw their enemies, they would hear their breaths. The laws of the steppe were simple. The strong survive. But this time, power was leading to a war that would upset the balance. The black hairs and the red beards came face to face over an unshared prey. The sun was watching the first spark of war. When the moon rose, the wise man of the river tribe looked into the water. The river told not only the past, but also the future. The stars sliding on the water carried the secret of the sky. "The night will be long," said the old wise man. "But when morning comes, nothing will be the same again." War was inevitable in the steppe. But this time, another decision was made instead of war. The leaders of the 5 tribes gathered around the fire. The spears raised to the sky marked the beginning of a new era. Now they would be one people. The laws of the steppe were changing. The ancient law of the steppe was clear. If blood was to be shed, it had to be offered first to the sky god Tengri and the mother goddess Umai. The leaders of the 5 tribes found the only way to stop the war. Goats were sacrificed, and the flames rose to the sky. The shape of the smoke whispered the future. Now they were blood brothers. The fate of the steppe was changing. Greymane had seen many battles. He knew hunting, justice, and patience. The eyes of the 5 tribes were on him. He thrust the spear in his hand into the ground and swore, "The steppe brotherhood will be as free as the wind, as everlasting as the sun." Eagles were watching from the sky. A new era was beginning. Every warrior carried the honor of his tribe. The youths of the 5 tribes walked, listening to the sound of the wind. The test that awaited them was the test of courage, loyalty, and brotherhood. The shadows were long, the night was cold. But when the sun rose, the true warriors would be chosen. When the moon rise, Greymane looked to the sky. The words of the old shaman echoed, "The bear has not yet come out of its den. For now, we must walk with the Ursa Major." And at that moment, a bear's howl came from afar. Nature had approved their decisions. The 5 tribes became one people. No longer were they the gray wolf, the black hare, or the river people. They were the children of the steppe. When the sun rose, a new era began. Tengri and Umai would protect them. The wind was whispering their name. Their stories would be told for generations. For the people of the steppe, time is written in the sky. Each 7-year cycle is completed with the successive appearance of 3 comets. When the 3rd one appears, the chosen group sets out. They do this as their ancestors did. Following an ancient tradition, they heed the call of the stars. After 7 years, those who come from the steppe arrive in Mesopotamia. Here they meet with old friends, and in the marketplace they barter goods inherited from their ancestors. Fires burn, music rises, laughter and tales adorn the nights. They are the ones who come from distant lands, the fair-haired ones, in shining metal garments that seem to have descended from the sky, carrying long spears. When they speak, the people of Mesopotamia listen in silence. The eyes of the steppe warriors drift towards the gleaming metal weapons. As the hunters listen to the stories of the fair-haired ones, the desire within them grows. To become stronger, to acquire what they possess. A new dream begins to question the old traditions. The festival ends, and the people of the steppe set out on the long journey once again. But for some, this is not a return, but a questioning. The hunters, caught between traditions and new stories, reflect on what the fair-haired ones told them over and over again throughout the night.